Hi, Whitney. This has been a long time coming. I think Danny has been trying to help me get you on the show for a long time. And I know you've been on a bunch of other Bitcoin podcasts, but yeah, nice to finally meet you. Nice to finally get you on the show.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. So you are very well known in Bitcoin circles, but it's always good to just give people a bit of a background in case they don't know who you are, if they haven't caught you
Sure.
on other podcasts. Can you just give a bit of your background?
Yeah, so I've been writing full time since I guess about 2016. And around probably the beginning of 2017, I became a staff writer for Mint Press News and then worked my way up to senior investigative reporter. I left there in probably like March or April 2020. I did some work for my friend Ryan Christian at The Last American Vagabond. And then a few months later, set up my own website called Unlimited Hangout. And there, I publish stuff, obviously, but also have some contributors as well. I have a podcast also called Unlimited Hangout, though it's kind of been on hiatus lately because I've had a really crazy year, as some people may know. And yeah, I mean, in general, I basically cover intelligence, Silicon Valley, all sorts of stuff sort of in that sphere. But, with the COVID era, for example, also got into some biosecurity stuff and, all sorts of things, sort of looking at how governments and corporations are in bed together and really not any fundamentally different than organized crime. But lately I've been doing a lot more on like financial stuff, specifically in banking. So.
Well, it's a good show for me to make them because ever since I discovered Bitcoin, I've been gradually getting dragged down this hole where I've realized everything everything I believed or everything I thought was true isn't true. And
happens to
now
everyone,
my friends
I
all think I'm crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so I guess you're like a proper old school investigative journalist rather than I've had Michael Malice on the show a couple of times. He refers to the mainstream media as corporate media, but
Sure,
I guess you're
that's
proper
fair.
old school.
Yeah, well, I mean, corporate media in the sense that like they're beholden to the corporations that own them, which invariably are any sort of oligarchs who have their hands in a number of pies that often include illegal activity. So, definitely different than what I do.
Well, so I mean, when I got into this, I kind of romanticized about investigative journalism, like the old school journalists who went out to find a story and do a proper job. But I kind of feel like there's less and less of that about now. I mean, the economics has changed, but you've probably got a view on it.
Yeah, well, I think, so, I mean, obviously the old days of investigative reporting, it's a lot different because of how online and digital everything is, including like archives of old newspapers and documents of that nature. So, I don't live in the West and I haven't for probably the last decade plus. But I care a lot about source material and like quality source material and building a story based off of that and supplying all those sources in my articles so that ideally, though obviously it doesn't always happen, but that ideally people who read my work would check those sources and if they're interested, pursue, their own research. Because I mean, it's not really about like, I don't want you to necessarily take my opinion or take, what I write about it at just face value and just like believe me, and like, no, believe the source material because it matters. And I'm not like making this up. Because, corporate media, right? Mainstream media, whatever, they don't really supply their sources a lot of the time for certain things, or they cite, a national security official and don't challenge what they have to say at all, or like add any important historical context about how maybe that official got caught lying during the Iraq War, for example, or all sorts of kind of stuff like that. So I try and add that kind of context. And frankly, though, there's like a lot of stories that just don't get covered either by mainstream media or even independent media. So much of independent media today is focused on like complaining about mainstream media coverage and not necessarily reporting on original stuff, which I think is actually kind of a big problem, because I think at this point we all know that mainstream media sucks, right? So there's definitely a need to like try and find the stories that aren't being covered, because there's, I mean, a lot of stuff, I think even too intentionally, like some of the tactics of mainstream media and the people that control them is to put out a story that's like intentionally annoying and outrageous so that everyone focuses on that and doesn't focus on other stuff in the news cycle, and other important stuff that is happening, slips through the cracks.
It's funny when you start to recognize it, start to see it, everything's becomes a lot clearer. But that first kind of step of recognizing it and seeing it for yourself, and it's a tough kind of barrier to break through, where you realize, hold on, none of this makes sense. I mean, it's like we live in this world of Bitcoin is a great example. I'm an advocate for it. I travel around. I try and make documentaries about it. I try and look at the economic situations of different countries.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and I understand the good that Bitcoin can do. I also understand the risks associated with it. I have a full picture, but we have so much press writing about Bitcoin so negatively and incorrectly. It makes me go, well, what else are they incorrect around? And I've found it a bit of a struggle, but then I found the biggest struggle is, my friends in my normie circles try and explain these things to them without sounding like a lunatic, because I think they look at me like I'm Alex Jones. They're like, oh, he's some crazy guy. But it's trying to actually make them understand that the incentives that are behind this. I don't know if you've had similar struggles.
No, absolutely. Well, I think the easiest way to reach people in that sense is to be like, are you aware that bankers lie and engage in illegal activity to expand their money and power, right? Are you aware that those same bankers, or CEOs or whoever, are the bulk of donations to politicians and own the political parties? Would they use that leverage to get what they want policy-wise? I mean, you have to build off of that to stuff that like people sort of are aware of, and then be like, well, the fact that these guys have never been held accountable for anything, what do you think they're going to do after decades and decades of no accountability and brazen criminality? How far do you think they'll take it? Right. And that's how you can sort of get some people, but obviously there's going to be people, who are resistant to seeing things for the way they are, because, some people just, for whatever reason, feel too uncomfortable engaging with reality sometimes. They don't want to face the fact that, the government and corporations are like extremely, doing insane illegal stuff that's killing people, or stealing insane amounts of money from people and ruining people's lives, because they're like, well, I can't do anything to change that. And I don't necessarily think that's true, but some people interpret it that way, and they're like, I'm better off not engaging with this. And they prefer to stick their head in the sand, so to speak. So that kind of stuff is harder to engage with, I think. But I think people that are open to figuring out the things, you can sort of think of ways to start at like a common denominator where we agree about incentives for the powers that be, and build off of that.
All right. Well, listen.